to Knits by Lizzy. My name is Lizzy and I'm a scientist from New Hampshire that loves to knit in my free time, and this is my channel where I talk about all things knitting. Today I have a knitting podcast for you, and this is going to be episode 7. My last knitting podcast update was about 3 weeks ago, and so I have quite a bit to talk about today. I've got 2 finished objects, including what I'm wearing here, which is the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit, and then my other finished object is my first gift knit of the season, which is the Petal Drop Sock by Florence Miller, which I knit for my mom for Christmas, and I have 2 new cast-ons because of those finished objects, which is also actually 2 gift knits. So we are definitely entering gift knitting season here now that November has started. So I have cast on a sweater for my stepdad for Christmas, and that is a Georgetown Henley. And then I also have cast on the Sunday sock by Petite Knit. So today we're going to talk about all of those objects, and then I also have some acquisitions to talk about, which is going to be for some more holiday goodness, and one of the acquisitions, the package actually arrived today, so you know, the timing all worked out. Today we've got a bit of a gray day here in New Hampshire, so you know, I did my best with the lighting. Hopefully the sun cooperates with us here. So yeah, if any of that interests you, I invite you to, you know, grab a project and a warm drink and hang out with us while we talk about some knitting. Okay, so I'm going to start off with finished objects, and the first of which is the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit. So the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit, my first finished object, is actually what I'm wearing here, and this ended up being my Rhinebeck sweater because I finished it like 2 days before Rhinebeck, and in my last update, I believe it did not have any sleeves yet, and I had just started with the button plackets here, so clearly I finished all of that because now it's a finished object. So first I'm just going to tell you guys about my knitting experience with this garment, and then at the very end I'm going to go into all of my kind of finished stats because this is a finished object. So this is a drop shoulder cardigan by Petite Knit that has an all over texture. It has this lovely diamond texture that I found really satisfying to knit. It's very, you know, like potato chippy, where you want to get to the next kind of like stage in the texture. And I talked a little bit about this in my last podcast. The way that it's set up in terms of like which row you're on for a right side row and a wrong side row, because obviously it's worked flat being a cardigan, it works out so that you are having to pay less attention on the wrong side, which I personally find like tracking my knitting, looking at where like knits and purls is harder for me on the wrong side, at least for this design it was. And so having the kind of like the most difference in the texture happening on the right side made it a lot easier for me to see. And so I actually only had to really pay attention to the charts that go with this pattern for the yoke basically. And then by the time that I got, you know, that all of the increases were done and that I was just going away on the body, I didn't have to look at the chart anymore. And so yeah, so that obviously makes this like, I wouldn't call it a mindless knit, but it's like almost getting to that point, because yeah, it's not like I was having to like look at the chart all the time. I could just kind of like work away on it. I had so much fun knitting this. It actually had me like getting up early before work to work on it because I was having so much fun knitting on it. It's a 16 stitch gauge, but my gauge was actually 14 stitches, and so that's, you know, that's a really chunky gauge. Things move really quickly, and I was knitting it on 5mm needles, and so being able to see progress so quickly makes it really, really satisfying. So yeah, just overall really enjoyable. So I did make a couple of modifications to this, which I'm going to go over. So I knit this in Stylecraft Special DK in the color Parchment, which is a 100% acrylic yarn, and I held it double because that's a DK weight yarn, and this calls for more like an Aran weight yarn, and so by holding 2 DK strands together, I was able to get that sort of closer to an Aran weight gauge. So because my gauge was off, I knit the very smallest size of this, and at first I thought I was gonna not have enough yarn, but I actually have almost an entire skein left over, so I definitely won yarn chicken for this garment. So yeah, so I was holding it double, and I had a much larger, looser gauge, and so I was able to knit the very smallest size in order to get a garment that what I was aiming for was actually like the second smallest size. So I was able to use my gauge issues to kind of actually help with my yarn chicken by knitting the very smallest size. We're having some sun changes here. So that was one change I made. And then I also ended up knitting this longer than what is called for in the pattern. So I would have had to end up, I think if I knit it to the number of centimeters that was called for in the pattern, I probably would have only knit like 6.5 repeats of that diamond. And then I ended up going for, I believe it was like a full 7 of those diamond repeats in my finished garment. And I am so glad that I did that. I really love the length of this. And my goal for this cardigan was to use it as more of like an outer piece, since it's called the Esther Jacket, not the Esther cardigan, I think, because that is what it is intended for. So yeah, I knit a full 7 diamonds, and then I knit the ribbings to the length that's suggested in the pattern. But one of the largest changes that I made to this is that when I picked up for my button bands, I ended up picking up for the number of stitches that you're supposed to pick up for the button band, I think for like size 5 or something, so several sizes above the size that I was knitting, because I have found that when you knit with 100% acrylic yarn, it will, you know, it'll just block out. Doesn't really happen that you can do, like, you know, the things that you can do with wool where you can knit ribbing and it's really cinched in, and then you can pin it out and it will stay that way once you wet block it. So with acrylic, I haven't really been able to do that. Granted, I have never like steam blocked anything, but I don't think that you don't have as much, you can't fix things with blocking with acrylic the way that you can with wet blocking wool, in my experience. If you are someone that has been able to kind of block out acrylic garments to change them to the like fit that you want, please let me know, because I am really curious about how you can kind of properly block an acrylic garment. Because what I do at the end, when I am done with a garment, I just throw it in the washing machine, which is one thing that I actually really love about acrylic, is that the care is so easy. You know, I am working on my PhD right now, so I don't really have the time to be carefully hand washing every item that I am knitting, and so acrylic really helps me with that. So I just throw it in the wash when I'm done, and I don't fully block it out. So what that means is that because I'm knitting this in acrylic and I'm not going to be able to stretch out ribbing to the length that I want it to be, I find that I'm getting cinching in garments at the ribbing when it's not supposed to be there and when I don't want it to be there. So for example, like a button band is something that you really don't want to be cinched in. And so I fixed that by doing 2 things. So I went up a needle size for what is suggested to knit the button band. So I just stayed the same needle size for this entire garment. So I didn't go down on the ribbing on the body, and I didn't go down a needle size for the ribbing on the button band. And then I picked up multiple sizes larger in terms of the number of stitches I was supposed to pick up for the button band. And I think that really worked out well for both of them, for both buttons, sides of this button placket here, and I'm not getting any weird cinching. So I'm really happy about that. I did end up just following, I think for the collar, I didn't change it as much because I'm okay with some cinching happening at the collar. So I just followed the instructions for the collar, and that worked out fine. And I ended up actually just following the instructions for the buttonholes as well. I was debating for a while trying to make them the holes smaller, but with the buttons I ended up going with, it worked out well. So I'm going to zoom in on my buttons here, because the buttons that I use. So I had to stop for a second to increase the lighting here because we had a cloud go over the sun that we got going on. So I want to show you the buttons that I ended up going for this, because I was thinking for a while that I was going to do toggle buttons. However, I finished this 2 days, like I said, 2 days before Rhinebeck. I didn't really have the time to go out and get different buttons, and so I was going through my stash. Not that I don't have like a ton of buttons, but I was looking through my stash, and I ended up finding, remembering that I had these really gorgeous metal buttons that I got in Copenhagen, and I had 5 of them, and the pattern called for 5 buttons. And they were maybe like slightly smaller, but like about the right size for this button band. And I think that this metal button on this kind of like beigey color worked so well. Yeah, so I'm gonna zoom in here real quickly. So I'm gonna insert some footage of a zoom in on those buttons, because they're really intricate. They've got this nice kind of like flowery design on them. And I just really think it adds a really nice touch to the finished garment. And I'm really, really happy with those buttons. buttons. So those are the buttons I ended up going with, and yeah, I think it really pulls the whole thing together, and it makes me love it like even more, especially because it like the fact that I got those buttons on our trip to Copenhagen means that like whenever I wear this garment or like look at this cardigan, it reminds me of that trip, and so now it's kind of like this cardigan is carrying those memories, so that's really nice. So yeah, I ended up going with my Copenhagen metal buttons. So I made another modification to this project, and that is when I picked up the stitches for the sleeves. I ended up picking way less than I was supposed to. So I ended up just following the pickup rate that she suggests in the pattern, which actually gave me something like 20 less stitches in the sleeve than what is called for in the small size. I can't remember the exact number fewer that I had, but it was in the 20s. So that's like a significant number of stitches, especially when I was working at a 14 stitch gauge. However, the distribution of them looked fine, especially, and I knit, after I knit like 5 or 10 centimeters of the sleeve, I tried it on again and to see if it was still looking like that number of stitches was okay, and I definitely think it worked out. In the pattern pictures by Petite Knit, the sleeves looked too big for my taste, and they were kind of like, at the point where you pick up stitches for the sleeves in the drop shoulder, they were kind of like billowing out. And I don't really like that look, and I didn't really want crazy oversized, like I felt like the sleeves were more oversized than the body of the garment, and I kind of want those things to match. And I had seen in other Ravelry project comments that other people were disappointed in how big the sleeves were too, and so I felt safe going with fewer stitches, especially when I was still just following the same pickup rate, so clearly my row gauge must have been off as well. But I actually think it worked out really well, and I don't think that the sleeves look like unusually small in proportion. Yeah, I think that it just kind of looks normal, you know, like it looks natural. So I'm happy with that modification. And then because I picked up so few stitches, I had to do a little bit of, you know, like tinkering to get the textured diamonds to be in the same spot that they're supposed to be if I had picked up way more stitches. And so the fairly easy solution to that was just to reduce the amount of moss stitch that goes in between this bunch of moss stitch wherever there's not the texture. And so I just reduced the number of moss stitches. And so I had, you know, my beginning of round underneath the arm, of course. And so then I just was evenly cutting out stitches on other side of the texture, and so then that was getting it about where it was supposed to be. And so so yeah, I think that worked out well. Again, that's probably another reason why I have more yarn left over. Like I was expecting to have basically no yarn left over, and I have like almost a full, essentially have half of one skein and half of another skein left over because I was holding them double, and so that means I have about a skein total left over. And you know, by yardage calculations, I was supposed to only have exactly enough, and me having a full skein left over, I think, is a consequence of me knitting such smaller sleeves than I would have been knitting otherwise. And honestly, because I was having to cut out so many stitches, and it looks normal, I think that if I had maintained the number of stitches that I was supposed to have, the sleeves probably would have looked wildly way too big. So everything just kind of worked out with this, and it ended up so quickly. And I finished this, like I said, it's been like about 3 weeks since my last update, so I've finished this, you know, about 2 weeks ago, and I've been worn this like almost every day since I finished it. I absolutely love it. And I even, this past weekend, I went to a childhood friend's wedding, which was a lot of fun, and it was a pretty fancy wedding, but I even, you know, over my like cocktail dress, I still wore this knit garment for the outside parts. So I had, you know, fancy dress on, and then my hand knit. I still think it went well. Like I felt like it was cute, and I felt like it kind of, you know, kept my whole vibe going. But yeah, that might show you just like how I just like didn't want to take it off, basically. So I've been wearing this all the time, and I think if I try to intentionally try to wear either a finished object when I'm filming a podcast, or wear a sweater that I haven't talked about yet, so I have the opportunity to talk about it. So if I wasn't kind of like holding that tradition of wearing those garments for my podcasts, I think you would end up seeing this all the time because of just like the frequency of how often I wear it. So yeah, overall super duper happy with this project and love how it fits. Super good success. Yeah, it's definitely, I have just would not be surprised if this ends up being my one of my favorite knits ever. So yeah, with that, I think I'm gonna get out my little chalkboard and tell you guys all the stats about this finished object. All right, so again, this is the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit, and I knit this in Stylecraft Special DK in the colored parchment. And I cast this on October 1st and cast it off on October 17th, so it only took me a little bit over 2 weeks to knit. It was so fast. And I knit the smallest size, so I believe that's extra, extra small in the pattern, and I used around 5 skeins of my yarn to knit this, and I knit this almost entirely on 5mm needles, and the only time I went down a needle size was when I was knitting the cuffs on the sleeves. So I did not go down a needle size on the body ribbing, I did not go down a needle size on the button plackets either. So I did buy 6 balls of this yarn to knit this project, and so because I did tap into all 6 skeins, I am going to calculate the cost for 6 skeins of yarn for this. And so 6 balls of this yarn for me was $20.24, and the pattern cost, which I bought on Ravelry from Petite Knit, was $7.56. So that gives me a total of $27.80 for this whole project. And that is using around 1,610 yards of my Stylecraft Special held double. So if you had an Aran weight yarn that you were holding single, that's about 800 yards of a chunky yard held single, if you were curious about getting a garment of this size with the yardage for that. I also put my measurements down in the description box, so if you're ever curious about either about how the sizing of a pattern of whatever I'm knitting and how it's fitting on my body, like how those are correlating, my measurements are in the description box. So yeah, that is the Esther jacket finished, and I really couldn't be happier with this project. My next finished object is the Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller, and this is a pay what you would like pattern from Florence Miller. She is handmade by Florence on Instagram and YouTube. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She has a great YouTube channel and knitting podcast. And yeah, so this pattern is something where you can either get it for free, or you can choose to pay 100% or 50% off. And she's got these like coupons on the Ravelry page, and so that's just like an amazing resource. And she also made a complete tutorial of how to make these. So if you have never knit socks before, period, you can knit these, and she has a really detailed tutorial on her YouTube channel about them. And if you, for example, have knit maybe like vanilla stockinette socks, but you want to dabble into making some fancier socks that that have some lace on them, another reason to check out her YouTube channel. So again, this is the Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller, and I have finished both of them. I only put one on the sock blocker here, so that's what I'm gonna talk about. So this is my first Christmas gift knit of the season, and I'm about to enter a time when basically I'm gonna be only knitting Christmas stuff almost probably like honestly until Christmas, so strap in guys, it's gonna be a lot of gift knitting. So this is my first completed gift knit of the season, and this was a request. These socks were directly requested. We got some cat noises going on. So these socks were directly requested by my mom. I had knit her the Arctic Light sweater by Veronica Lindbergh, and I knit it for her in a white color, cream white color. And so she wanted to get some socks that were still kind of, like cabled or lace that would kind of, not exactly match obviously, but would go with her Arctic Light sweater. And this is actually the second pair of these socks that I've knit. So I've knit a pair of Petal Drop socks for myself as well. And I don't know if my mom has seen them in person, but I've definitely sent pictures of my Petal Drop socks to my mom, and she absolutely loved how they looked, and so she was just like, I want those exact ones. So that's why I'm knitting this Petal Drop socks again, but the process is really great. The lace pattern is super easy to memorize, so I was not upset that she requested a pattern that I've made before. I was really excited to make them again. However, I did choose a different yarn to knit these socks in than what I had knit my pair in. So I knit these in Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock, which is about 50-50 acrylic and nylon. And my pair I knit in Cascade Yarns Cotton Socks, they spell it S-O-X, cotton socks, and that is about 90% cotton and only 10% nylon. And even though the hank of that yarn was really, really soft, the worked up fabric was not. And they're still definitely wearable, and I love wearing them. I wear them once a week and then they go in the wash and then I wear them again. So it definitely didn't, it's not like so bad that I can't wear the project, but I am not going to be making any more socks out of the cotton socks yarn, and the skeins that I have left, I'm planning on just making tank tops out of them. So I definitely wanted to use a different yarn for when I was making these for my mom. So I went for the Cherub Sock by Cascade Yarn instead, and I'm really glad I did it. They're super duper soft. Here, I'll zoom in on the pattern. So I'll definitely put in some footage of the pattern so you guys can see. So yeah, I don't really have a ton more to say on these other than I just really highly recommend this pattern, and the tutorial that goes with them is great. And I can't really comment on how this yarn will wear for socks because I've never made socks in it before, but working with it was great. Maybe it was like the teeny tiniest bit splitty, but I was also knitting lace in metal needles, so that's just kind of a situation where you're more likely to get some splitting. I did knit these on 9-inch circulars on 2mm, 2.0mm needles. I am a bit of a looser knitter, so I went down from what the pattern suggests. So pretty small needles, and I prefer 9-inch circulars for socks. I've tried Magic Loop, and I end up getting a big, would it be a ladder? A big ladder in between when I'm changing going from needle 1 to needle 2 and vice versa, and I don't know how to get rid of that. If you know how to get rid of that, please let me know. But yeah, I prefer whenever I can to use just 9-inch circular so I can knit completely in the round for my socks instead of using Magic Loop, because I've tried that and it didn't work out great. So I'm gonna get out my chalkboard again and give you the final stats for this finished object. Okay, so these are the Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller, and I cast them on October 7th and finished them on October 23rd. So they took me a little bit over 2 weeks to knit, and I knit size 2, again, as I said, on 2mm needles. The yarn I used for this was Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock, and this is the color 09 or Ecru, and I used about half the skein to knit both of these socks, so I could probably get actually a second pair of socks out of this, and so that's like around 250 yards for this project. And so because I only bought the one skein for these socks, or used one skein for these socks, that was $8.50 for this yarn. So that means that the total project cost for this is $8.50 for that one yarn, because I didn't have to pay anything for the pattern, which was really nice. So this is a really bang for your buck kind of project. I think that it's one of those situations where it looks way more complicated than it actually is, and I just know that my mom's gonna be really excited about them, so I can't wait to give them to her. Okay, so now it's time to move on to my works in progress, which are actually both 2 new cast-ons, so it's cast-ons and whips at the same time. So my first work in progress that I'm going to discuss is the Georgetown Henley by Allison Griffith, which I am knitting for my stepdad, and this is another gift knit that I'm intending to give him for Christmas. So let me just get this out. Okay, so here it is. Let me hold it up to the light here so you can see. So this is a Henley sweater that is designed for men by Allison Griffith, and this is a Knit Picks pattern, and so I just bought it. You can't actually buy it on Ravelry. You have to go to the Knit Picks website in order to buy it. Just making sure I'm getting this in the frame here. So you can see that I've actually gotten quite a lot done on this, and it's got this textured pattern to it that you work with 2 colors, but it's not stranded color work, so you do one row in one color and then another row in the next color, and so that makes things way easier. And so I'm knitting this out of Brava Recycle, and the colors I'm using is a black, which is called Carl, and a dark gray, which is called Rayan. And so show them here. These are the ones I'm working out of, so they are, hold up to light there. So yeah, they're not really, like, they don't look very pretty, but because I'm working out of them. So yeah, so this is Bravo Recycle, which is a 100% acrylic that has been recycled, which is great. And I thought, you know, Knit Picks pattern, I should use Knit Picks yarn. So there was a bit of a saga to find the right yarn for this project. So my stepdad in early October had popped in on a, you know, like a FaceTime catch up and asked for another sweater for Christmas. I had knit him the zipper sweater Man by Petite Knit last Christmas, and he really, really liked it, and he wore it a lot in the colder months. So he definitely, you know, he's definitely a knit worthy person. So he really wanted another sweater, and at first he was like, oh, I'll just take another zipper sweater. I was like, well, I can make you something else. What about something like a Henley where you've got still kind of like a quarter open but with buttons? And he liked that idea, and so I found this Henley pattern, the Georgetown Henley, and I sent him the picture, and he really liked the picture, and he actually really liked the colors of the picture, which is like this heathered blue with a gray. And so I went on this mission to try to find a blue yarn that would work. But every blue that I was finding was either, you know, like too green or too kind of bright or too maybe like feminine, that, you know, a color that he wouldn't really like to wear. And, you know, I kept giving these suggestions to my mom, and they all weren't right. And so we finally just ended up having to give up on the blue yarn. It just wasn't going to turn out that we were gonna find a good blue yarn. So I definitely am still just curious. Like what I really was looking for was like a blue yarn with like grayish undertones. I don't know, maybe that just like doesn't even exist, but that was what I really wanted, and I just couldn't find it in acrylic. So that was a bit disappointing. However, we did decide that a gray and black heathered would definitely be something that he would also really like to wear. He wears a lot of gray. And so clear, you know, I really wanted to make a garment that he would actually wear. So the colors I think were really important. And the black and gray combo is just like really classic. I feel like it's definitely a combination that I think he's gonna wear. So that's the drama behind the yarn. It took me like a good 2+ weeks in order to find the right yarn, and then it finally arrived. So this sweater, as you can see from what I held up there. So this sweater, as you can see, is knit bottom up. So I have just cast on and then knit the ribbing, and then I'm actually almost done with the body here. And this is actually gonna be my very first bottom up sweater. And yeah, I'm a little nervous about the fact that I've never knit a bottom up sweater before and just like getting the fit right. So much so that I actually purchased a top down Henley pattern, and my plan originally was to kind of Frankenstein those patterns together and take like the texture pattern from the Georgetown Henley and kind of like squish it on to a top down Henley pattern and like work out the stitches with that. But what happened was it was about 2 days before we went away last weekend, and so I really wanted to cast this on so that I could work on it in the car, because we drove to Philadelphia, where the wedding was, from where we live in New Hampshire. So it was a pretty long drive, and so obviously like I wanted to get a lot of work done on this gift knit, and so I didn't want to have to be casting on in the car. And I sat down to cast on, and I just like took a look at the top down pattern and this bottom up pattern, and I just did not have the energy to try to figure out how to adjust the short rows with the textured pattern for the to put it in the top down, to like put that same texture pattern on the top down pattern that I bought. And so I just decided, okay, you know, if I cast on for a bottom up pattern, if I cast on for a bottom up sweater, then all of the hard parts are gonna be after the body, which is gonna take the longest. And so I was like, I'm just gonna cast on so that I can just work on something in the car. And so I did get a lot of stuff done in the car. I think I've got almost like 30+ centimeters on the body. So I'm probably, you know, still have a little bit to go on the body, but getting close-ish to where I should split for sleeves. And yeah, so I am nervous about that part specifically. I've never knit a bottom up sweater before, and so I'm nervous about how you attach the sleeves. probably what I'll end up doing is just watching some YouTube tutorials, because I find it really helpful when if I see someone else do it, it helps me learn how to do it a lot better than just reading instructions on it. And so for basically whenever I've had to do a new knitting technique, I've just like turned to YouTube knitting school and learned how to do it. So yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna end up doing, but I'm a little nervous for that. And yeah, so you knit everything's bottom up, right? So you knit the sleeves separately, bottom up, so you like cast on the cuff and then go up, and knit the sleeves separately and then attach them. And I think there are short rows in this pattern as well when I get to that point. But because I'm not actually going to be doing that kind of squishing of two patterns together, the short rows that I'm going to be following were ones that are actually written for this exact texture. And so then I'll be able to actually, you know, the designer will have already figured out all the, you know, the right way to turn and all these things. So yeah, you know, that's why we buy patterns. Yeah, I'm not at that point yet. That'll be definitely like a little fiddling to do. So I think this is another time when I can ask for even more tips. There's been a lot of that in this episode already, but yeah, so if you have knit bottom-up sweaters and you have any tips for a beginner bottom-up sweater knitter joining sleeves, I would love to hear any tips. Or if you know of a really good tutorial about doing that, that's like on YouTube, definitely feel free to link it down below. You know, maybe there's other people watching this that have never knit bottom-up and are curious about that, so that could be a great resource for all of us. So yeah, that is where I'm at with my Georgetown Henley that I'm knitting as a Christmas gift for my stepdad. I'm happy with the amount of progress that I made on this. Our drive to Pennsylvania took 4 hours longer than it was supposed to because the traffic was so bad, which was awful. But it actually did mean that I got a ton of knitting time done. So you know, knitting a whole sweater for someone for Christmas is like a feat and takes a long time. And this is a DK weight, you know, this is DK weight yarn, and I'm knitting it for a man. He's not super tall, so he's, you know, he's a medium. I'm knitting size 3 for him. And I believe I haven't mentioned yet, I'm knitting size 3 on 4mm needles. And so it's not, I'm not going to be knitting as big of a sweater as like for my boyfriend, who's about 6 foot. So that'll be, you know, just a little bit less knitting is going to be required for that. So I do definitely think it's possible. And now that I got so much of that knitting on this done in the car, I do think that it's very, very reasonable that in 2 months or a little less than 2 months that I'm going to be able to finish this. So I had been almost monogamously knitting on this the past 3 weeks or 2-ish weeks. And I only just recently cast on what I'm about to talk about next. So this has received a lot of attention, but now I've kind of gotten at a point where I don't feel like I need to kind of like frantically knit on it. I have enough of it done that I feel like I can just like casually pick away at this and definitely have it done in time for Christmas. And I've got some more cast-ons planned that I'll talk about at the end with our acquisitions. So I do think that this was still probably gonna be basically my primary knit, but I'm not gonna be, I was like monogamously knitting on it. Most of the time between when I'm filming now and my last podcast has been focused on this. So yeah, I think I'm gonna allow myself to work on other projects too, since I've gotten it to a point that I feel comfortable with. And I go back and forth about whether I really actually like being a monogamous knitter. You know, finishing projects quicker doing monogamous knitting is, you know, that's really satisfying. But there was some points when I only had that one sweater to work on that I was feeling like, oh, I just kind of want to switch it up, you know. So so I'm at a point where at least I have 2 WIPs right now, and I'm definitely gonna be casting on a 3rd one tomorrow. So yeah, I'm moving out of monogamous knitting back into kind of what I say more like what I classically do, which is have a main project and then other things that I kind of like pick away at. So yeah, that's the Georgetown Henley by Allison Griffith that I'm knitting for my stepdad for Christmas. Okay, so my next WIP and new cast on is the Sunday Socks by Petite Knit, and I am knitting this also as a Christmas gift, and these are going to be for my brother. So this is a DK weight sock pattern by Petite Knit that is 2x2 ribbed, and it's really, really chunky, and I have actually never knit a DK weight sock before. I've only knit fingering weight socks, and so I was really excited about the prospect of something that would go pretty quickly and would still be like this great finished object that the recipient would be happy to have. So yeah, this was a a project that I've been thinking about for a few weeks now. I think I've mentioned it a couple times that it was on my horizon, and part of this also came out of, you'll notice that there's no Hollingbourne socks on my list here today. So I did end up deciding to frog the Hollingbourne socks. I just wasn't feeling the colorwork socks, and honestly maybe, you know, I might not be a colorwork sock person, even though I definitely really enjoy knitting colorwork sweaters, mittens, and stuff. So, you know, the really tight gauge with colorwork might just not be my thing, I'm discovering. So yeah, I ended up frogging those, and then I actually cast on a different DK weight sock from my 52 weeks of sock book, but then I just knit the cuff, and it was a complicated lace pattern, and I also just wasn't feeling trying to figure that out. And so I decided, you know what, let's go with something that is much more simple that I know is really gonna work out. And so I went for the Sunday socks by Petite Knit. And so I am knitting these in Barocco Comfort, which is 50% nylon, 50% acrylic sock. So it's a fingering weight that I'm holding double to get DK. So I'll hold it up to the light here. So this is a brown color, brown grayish color that I think is going to be, you know, pretty just classic, easy wearable color for my brother. I am thinking of these being, you know, they're not that fancy of socks, right? They're just really cozy, comfy, like house socks. And my brother works from home, and so I thought that these were good work from home socks to keep your feet warm. They're almost like more like slippers while you're just, you know, working at your desk and computer. So I'll show you my progress here. Put down the yarn. So these are, as I said, 2x2 ribbed socks. You are intended to fold over the cuff here, and so you knit a really long leg and then just fold it over. But because they're DK weight, I cast these on yesterday maybe, or the day before, and I'm almost done with the gusset decreases on the first sock. So this sock could probably be done honestly by the end of the day tomorrow, and I really feel like by next week I will probably be done with the second sock. So very quick, really satisfying. By holding these double, I'm also knitting these on 3mm needles, and the pattern actually calls for 4mm needles, but me being a looser knitter, I wanted to go down, and then also I was just really wanted to make sure that they were at a really tight gauge so that they would last better. Like I feel like you're less likely to get holes in your socks if it's at a tighter gauge. And so yeah, so I went for 3mm needles instead of 4mm needles, and the resulting fabric is quite dense. I think I maybe should have done like 3.25 or 3.5, but I still think that it's gonna fit, especially like 2x2 rib is so stretchy, you know? And so I think that it really gives you a lot of leeway when you're knitting something for somebody. Like my brother and I live, you know, we live on different ends of the country, and so he's not here to try them on and to test. So I think it does give you a lot of leeway in terms of, or like you have a lot of grace with the sizing, right? Like if almost should edge toward too small, but because they're so stretchy, they'll probably fit. And it works out that my boyfriend is a shoe size 11 and my brother is a shoe size 10-ish, in between 10 and 11. And so definitely if my boyfriend can get them on his foot and they fit, then it will fit my brother. So I'm hoping to make them just like a touch too small, like a touch snug for my boyfriend, and then it will hopefully like fit perfectly for my brother. I'm kind of like using my boyfriend as like my model for all the men's items I'm knitting for my family that don't live near me. But then he's not the same size as everyone, so that maybe it's not the smartest thing, but that's just what I'm doing. So that's my plan with these. They're pretty satisfying. Because the fabric is so dense, sometimes I'm having to wrestle with it a little bit, which is probably not a good sign. Maybe I'm just like tensing up when I'm knitting it or something. And I am also finding that maybe because it's dense, just because it's DK weight, that, for example, I can like see my knit twos together and my SSKs with more definition than I can on my other socks. I don't know if it looks bad, it's just different. But yeah, I think these are pretty nice chunky socks. I am doing a heel flap and gusset. The pattern called for just a stockinette heel flap, but I've never made a stockinette heel flap before, and I've heard, however, that if you don't do the slip, what we just call it, the slip stitch heel flap, that by doing the slip stitch heel flap, you're getting more, a more sturdy fabric on that heel flap, that which tends to wear really hard on socks. And so I decided to modify that to make it a slip stitch heel flap instead of a heel flap. So that's one modification that I've made. And then the other modification that I've made is that I cast on for the second to largest size for the leg, but I am at the, I'm almost done with the gusset decreases, but my plan is only to decrease not all the way back to the number of stitches for the second largest size, and do the largest size for the foot, since I think that will cause it to fit him better, to have maybe like slightly more snug on the leg but more room on the foot part. As long as he can still get these on, like the leg part getting over his foot and then cinching in at the leg, I think that will work out really well, because then it's not like his socks are gonna be falling down, which, like, who wants that? So yeah, that's what we've got. We've got have a sock here, and I have a feeling that by my next podcast that these will be a finished object, because they just are going really, really quickly. So that's my update on my Sunday socks. Alrighty, so now I'm gonna move into my acquisition section, and I'm really excited to show you what I've got. I've got quite a bit. I've received multiple orders, and I'm gonna kind of like brush through my my first order that I received, because I have talked about it on the podcast before, and what I really want to talk to you guys about is that I've received yarn for my Christmas sweater that I'm hoping to cast on tomorrow, so that I can knit it through all of November and be able to wear it in December when I'm going to holiday events. So the first acquisition is some mohair that I received. Hold up to the light. This is Lamy Yard Soft Sensations. It is a polyamide and acrylic blend that is a really good kind of dupe for animal fiber mohair. It's lace weight and really, really fluffy. I have made one garment out of this so far, but I'm planning on clearly making a lot more garments out of this. And so this is I've got some brown and some black here. And this mohair I actually ordered in September when I signed up for the Gregoria Fibers test knit that I did, and I was planning on holding this black mohair here with a kind of like grayish green yarn, a DK weight yarn for that pattern, and the package ended up getting lost by UPS. And so I ended up I had a light gray version of this mohair yarn in my stash, and so I just held my grayish green DK weight yarn with that mohair for that project, and it all worked out. UPS lost the shipment, and so then I had to contact the yarn company, and let them know that I hadn't received the package, and then it took a while. They reached out to UPS, and it took a while before UPS decided to say, oh yes, we have actually lost your package, and then the yarn company had to send me another package for it to finally get to me. This I ordered a while ago, and I do have plans for it already, and I do have plans for this, and they are, so I showed you guys the buttons in my Rhinebeck video that I'm gonna do with this, but I'll just quickly show again that my plan for the brown mohair is to hold it with this Kind Feather by Hobie, to make a book club cardigan by Nordland, and my plan for this black mohair, is to hold it with this Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock in a dark gray, so hold these together. And I did swatch already for this because I wasn't sure, obviously that dark gray and the black aren't the same color, and so I knew there was going to be some marling, so I wanted to make sure that I actually liked the marling that was happening. So I wanted to make sure that I really liked the marling that was happening, and I do. And so my intention with this, it's so light. The fingering weight Cascade Yarns plus the mohair held together is so good. Oh, it's so good and it's so soft. I'm so excited for this. So my plan for this is to knit an April cardigan by Petite Knit, and it's actually going to be my second one that I've made. And so I've made one before that was pretty tight fitting and was green, which I love. I wear it a lot. However, I wanted one that was a little bit bigger and a more neutral color so that I could wear it in different situations, you know? And I think that this dark gray and black marl is going to be perfect for that. I think that you know, like a dark gray, black-ish cardigan would be really good for like, you know, interviews or that sort of thing, and would be pretty wearable. And this fabric feels so good, so I'm really excited about that. I probably won't be casting it on until 2025 would be my guess, but what I am excited for whenever I do get to it, especially since I knit the first April cardigan in just a DK weight yarn, and this April cardigan I'm actually going to be knitting in a fingering and a lace weight held together, which is what the pattern actually calls for. But I've spent a lot of time knitting patterns obviously in yarn that is not what's called for. Me being a vegan knitter, I knit only in acrylic, and pretty much I haven't encountered like any patterns that actually call for acrylic. So I've had to do a lot of substitutions, and it often results in me knitting in one strand when there's lots of patterns that call for two, and that's been fine. It's worked out well, but I have always been really curious about what the kind of fabric would be like if I had a fingering and lace weight held together. And my issue was that I didn't have a vegan mohair. And so once I discovered this Lamb Yarn Soft Sensations, it kind of really opened those doors for me. And so I've been ordering a lot of it, as you'll see, ordering a lot of it so that I can hold it with things that I already have and create these nice kind of like fluffy halos. Even though those yarns arrived within the past span since my last podcast, I still feel like they're kind of old news because I ordered them so long ago and they just took so long to get here. So I'm not as excited about them as I was when I ordered them. Like, obviously I am excited about them in the fact, like, I am excited to knit with them, but I have the like excitement of knowing that they're coming has kind of faded away. However, I am super excited about this next acquisition that I'm going to show you. So I have been talking for ages about how I'm going to knit a holly sweater by Pernilla Larson for Christmas, and I put this in my queue before last Christmas and didn't end up knitting it because I basically knit too many gift knits in order to be able to knit a Christmas sweater for myself. And so this year I'm really determined in order to knit it, and so that's why I wanted to cast it on in November. And actually, when I'm filming, it's November 2nd, and so I would actually, today would be, or like yesterday, November 1st would be normally the time that I would switch into Christmas mode because I love Christmas so much. I like, just December's not enough for me. So this would normally be the time that I'd be switching into Christmas mode, but we're actually going to a Halloween party today, later tonight. And so I couldn't switch into Christmas mode and then go to Halloween party. And so tomorrow, once Halloween is like really over, like no more Halloween festivities, that's when Christmas is gonna start for me. And so that's when I'm casting on the sweater. And it worked out that actually the mohair for the sweater arrived today. And so I was gearing up to film the podcast, and I remembered that this package was on its way. And so I went to check the tracking, and it hadn't updated any sort of delivery date for the whole time that it's been moving through the system. It just said like, this is where it is and it's coming, but it didn't actually give an estimate. And so I didn't know when it was supposed to come. And so this morning I looked and it said today's date, and so I was like, oh, that's great, I wonder if it will come before filming. And I looked up from my phone to the window outside, and there was the postman had just arrived at my house to deliver it. And so it was kind of crazy, like right exactly at the time that I was thinking, oh, I wonder if I'll receive that package for this podcast. It arrived at that exact moment. So I'm definitely meant to talk about this yarn on this podcast today. So let me get it out. Okay, so I am going to be doing another combination of the Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock held with this mohair to knit the sweater because it calls for a fingering merino and a lace weight mohair held together. And so my version of that is going to be the Cherub Sock 50% nylon, 50% acrylic, which is the fingering weight held with this vegan mohair. And so I'm going to be knitting the main body of it in the same color that I knit the Petal Drop Socks on, which is 09 Ecru. And this is like a pretty white, and they do have a white mohair. But I decided to order a beige mohair to hold with it, and it's like the perfect shade of beige. It's really, really great. So there's going to be a little bit of marling with this, but it's actually what I intended because the holly sweater, the color that the main samples knit out of is actually not like a white. It is a, what's it called? I think it's called something like camping or something like along those lines, but basically it's kind of like an oatmeal looking color, and it actually does look kind of heathered. It's not like totally true one color the whole way. And so I think that by holding this white and this beige together, it's going to really mimic that same color. And I've looked through the Ravelry projects, and there are quite a few projects where someone, there are lots of projects where someone knit in beige, and then there's other projects where someone knit the main color in like a true white, and I really prefer the look of the beige as the main color instead of the true white. So I think that this is gonna, I haven't swatched yet, but I really think that this is gonna achieve the look that I was going for. So that's gonna be the main body of the color of the sweater. And then the berries are gonna be in, again, all of this is like the same yarn combinations of the cherub sock held with the Lamb Yarn Soft Sensations merino. But the berry is gonna be in color, let's see, this is color 74, so it's like a dark red, and then the color number 42 in the mohair, which is another dark red, and so I feel like these are a pretty good, match. And they're gonna be, yeah, like a very true red. Yeah, these are a really nice berry red that I think it's gonna, like cranberry red, that I think it's gonna look really good for the berries on the sweater. And then for the leaves, I got this color, which I believe is called fir green. It's color number 60, and it is absolutely the perfect green for these leaves. And then the mohair that I got to hold with it is, let's see, this is color number 71. This is, I believe it's called olive green, and I do think that's a good description of it. So obviously these are not the exact same green, and I kind of wish that this mohair was a lot closer to this color, because this is really the color that I was going for. But I still think this mohair will give it a green halo, and you know, the color work on the holly sweater really is, you know, it's just a small portion of the yoke. It's not even the whole yoke. And I guess if I really don't like the combination of this green held with this green, if this green is kind of making the leaves look too yellow, I can play with just not holding a mohair for just the leaves and see how weird that looks. It might be kind of funny, but also it'll be surrounded by other yarns that have mohair, which might just like make sure that there's fuzz all around still. So that might be one thing that I'm gonna play with, but I don't know. I have a feeling it's gonna be fine. So yeah, that's my green. That's gonna be my leaves. And so yeah, I just wanna let me just hold these up. Like this just, oh, I'm so excited for it. These colors especially, like the main colors I'm going to be holding, I love them so much. Like this, hold the next light here. I'm so excited for these. I think it's going to be so great. And it looks so Christmassy. So yeah, it's just going to give me a lot of joy. So yeah, I think that brings us to the end here. Lots of acquisitions. You know, I don't always have a ton of acquisitions, but this time I did. And I am thinking that this video will probably go out around Monday. But I have decided that moving forward, my plan is to try and film on Sundays and then upload on Wednesdays, because every time that I've tried to film during the week, it just has never worked out. I did actually, this is my second time filming this podcast. I filmed it a few days ago during the week after work, and if you think the lighting today was bad, it was when it's like late afternoon. It really didn't work out. So I think that's my plan. So from now on, you can expect videos to be Wednesdays. I am planning on soon filming a yarn stash video, because my yarn stash really needs to get organized, and I think if I show you guys everything that's in my yarn stash, that'll be kind of a good excuse to organize it. And I do think that, you know, I haven't seen that many yarn stash videos that are mainly acrylic or you know, just plant fibers and acrylic. So I know that I would have found that really useful at the beginning of my knitting journey, to see, okay, what are good acrylics that people like to work with, because I have been on a bit of a journey this past year trying a bunch of different acrylic yarns, and I've started to hone in on the ones that I really like. So I thought that would be really fun and could potentially be useful to someone else. So I don't know if it'll necessarily be the video after this, but definitely I think sometime soon there's going to be a yarn stash tour. So if you are interested in seeing that, please feel free to subscribe and hang out with us more often as we chat about some knitting. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. That helps it reach more people, and that would make me really happy. And as always, I love reading your guys' comments, so please feel free to say hello down in the comments. Even if you know, I know I did ask for quite a bit of opinions and tips in this video, so even if you don't need to give advice in order to leave a comment, please just say hello and let me know what you're knitting on. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this next this season of holidays and Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's one of my favorite times of the year, and I really just kind of want to lean into it and soak it all up while you can, because it always goes really fast, and it just feels like these days time, you know, moves faster. As you get older, it is true that time does move faster, it seems. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a lot of gift knitting. If you're doing some gift knitting, let me know which patterns you guys are gonna work up. I think that I might be gonna make a cowl, I think, for someone in my family, and more of those Sunday socks probably. So there's gonna be some fun projects coming up. And so I think with that, it'll bring me to the end here. So I'm just gonna send lots of big hugs to everyone, and I will see you next time.